to the NABS Now podcast, brought to you by the National Association of Blind Students, a proud division of the National Federation of the Blind.
Welcome to the NABS Now podcast. There are so many tools and platforms used by modern-day workforce and employees. Anything from Microsoft Office to Zoom, secure cloud platform, and so much more. It's almost a necessity to gain meaningful employment as a blind person to fluently navigate these platforms, to fluently navigate in these dynamic environments. But are there such thing as streamlined, on-demand training to gain these professional skills to be successful in the modern-day workforce? That's what this show is all about. I've had a chance to sit down with a CEO and a founder, as well as a graduate of a newly established, strong education startup that aims to bridge the gap for a blind person to obtain meaningful development in these areas and even get ready for college, and so much more. So let's dive right into Clusiv and enjoy the show. From the NABS Now studio, I got two gentlemen, a graduate and a CEO of Clusiv. I'm really excited to have them on the show. I'm sure they could talk more about their role. So I'm going to go ahead and toss the mic over to Luke.
Thank you, Seyoon. Pleasure to be here. Really excited to be talking to all the students and all your listeners. My name is Luke Simianer. I'm the CEO and founder of Clusiv. That's clusiv.io is our website. And excited to talk more about this.
Hi, thank you very much for having me. And my name is Kassahun Yibeltal. I'm a recent graduate of Clusiv. Well, I'm very glad to share my experience with that program. Thank you once again for having me.
Yeah, we're really fortunate to have the CEO and the founder of the company. Not only that, we have a graduate here, so it's going to be a very engaging discussion. Some of the amazing work that you guys have been doing. So I thought I would start with talking a little bit about how this started, that this education startup ended up even materializing really for you, Luke. What was the idea that you had?
Yeah, I mean, it's a bit of a longer story, but I think it really ties in, especially for all the students out there listening. I was born to a single mom in pretty abject poverty. And when I was 7, I was diagnosed with dyslexia, severe dyslexia. And at the time, the school system treated that as a form of mental retardation. That's how they classified me. They threw me in a trailer behind the school, and that really summarized my K through 12 experience, right? It never got better. I never really felt challenged or stimulated, and that carried on for quite some time. I ended up joining the Army at a young age. I joined the Army at 17. My mom had to essentially sign a permission slip for me to join and emancipate me. At the age of 19, I was wounded in Afghanistan. I was a paratrooper, and that ended up finishing my military career. So I get out, and I worked a whole bunch of jobs, everything from driving concrete trucks to installing cable to working at different factories, working on the railroad even. Fast forward to when I was 25. I'd moved to Austin, Texas, kind of on a whim, actually for a girl. And at the time, Austin was this starting to boom software gold rush, if you will, right? If you could write a few lines of code, you could get a job that paid more than you'd ever heard of.
It's like a secondary Silicon Valley, you could say, huh?
Yeah, it was really showing. It was like a gold rush. And so I taught myself how to code. And I ended up, it took me about a year. I taught myself how to code decent enough to half fake my way through a job interview. And I got my first software engineering job. And at this job, it was for a big multinational insurance company, and I was working on some of the back end and front end stuff for it. This company, a few months into me working there, ended up getting sued for Title III litigation, or ADA noncompliance of their digital assets. The CEO and the CTO came down to the engineering office, and they were like, "Hey guys, does anybody know anything about engineering and accessibility? How do we make this product work? This lawsuit's big. It's really big, and it's bad." So no one, of course, knew anything material about accessibility engineering or how to really tailor a user experience for that. But later that night, I was actually working out and I had this thought. I was like, my mom married this guy, my stepdad, who happens to be blind. I know him. We've had drinks together a few times. Of course, I go home to see my family, but we weren't best friends. So I call him and I'm like, hey, if I sat you next to me and you pointed out where something was broken and I tried to fix it, and I got you paid for it, would you be down? And he said, yeah. And so I pitched that to the CTO and the CEO the next day. And I'm scared because I'm still a very green engineer. I'm like, I'm going to get fired from this idea.
Oh, sure. Yeah.
Imposter syndrome is a very real thing. And I pitch it to them and they're like, you can do that? I'm like, yeah. So they had me on a flight home the next day. And in 7 working days, me and my stepdad mitigated a multi-million-dollar lawsuit. I sat him next to me, and where he found a break in the app, I implemented to fix the code. In doing that, I really learned how to really design and structure code for a user experience that's purpose-built for a screen reader using individual. So that was very cool, very awakening experience. But where it really all started, where the fire came from to give up everything and build a company, was at the end of this. My stepdad had gotten paid. I got a raise and a promotion. I was on cloud 9, but my stepdad was depressed, downtrodden.
Right.
And I was like, Ken, what's the matter? Why are you upset? This part still gets me. But he said, Luke, for the first time in my life, I feel intellectually valued. And it sucks because it's never going to happen again. And that just struck me. I was like, what do you mean it's never going to happen again? And he said, jobs like this don't exist for blind people out there, not in any sort of meaningful scale, right?
Sure. Yeah.
I've been packing toilet paper since I lost my vision in my 20s, and the most I'll ever make is $10 an hour, and that's that. And that's if I'm a manager at this plant here. It all kind of hit me. Like every job I'd worked prior, everything I'd done prior in my life, I was valued for like my ability to conduct labor, right? Whether it was carrying a machine gun in Afghanistan or working on railroad tracks. Engineering was the first time that I got to be valued for my brain. I had this idea, let's go execute. And to me, that's part of the American dream. That's part of the beauty of this country is you can come from nothing and build very much something for yourself.
They have opportunity.
And to me, it started to dawn on me that the American dream really wasn't accessible. And I was like, how do I bridge this gap? So I spent the next year of my life researching it, still working as an engineer. And what I came to discover was that, to me, the biggest gap that the blind community faced as a barrier was no one had taught blind individuals at scale how to leverage their assistive technology to perform the tasks that are actually relevant for the modern workforce. It's no longer just email. It's multiple email platforms, multiple digital meeting platforms, multiple cloud storage platforms. It's a new level of technological competency that's expected even at the entry level. And that is, in my mind, what contributes so much to the unemployment rate. And so I said, well, I'm going to build a learning platform. It's going to be the most accessible thing the world's ever seen. It's going to have content written by blind professionals who have actually walked the walk, and it's going to be scalable. 2.5 years later, here we are. And that's the story of Clusiv so far.
I really admire that story. I think you may have just coined it for the best storytelling on this podcast thus far.
Oh, thank you.
That was a very huge historic evolution and a lot of different trajectory that you took to get to where you are now with Clusiv. That's impressive. Thanks for sharing. And then also being a little vulnerable about some of your past experiences. I want to turn my attention to Kassahun, who is the recent graduate of Clusiv programs and curriculum. Would you like to share your journey as far as what led you to and how you discovered Clusiv?
Thank you very much. I am very, very much delighted to talk about Clusiv because I, as a graduate of this training, this organization, I can say that this training that I have just completed is one of the most successful training that I have ever taken before. I have taken 2-3 trainings, but this one is the most important to me in many aspects. I came across Clusiv for the first time, I think in November this year at NFB convention, Virginia State Convention. Mm-hmm. And I had to visit the exhibition area. I went there, as I usually do, to have a look at technology devices and whatever. And the first desk was that of Clusiv. And I talked to them, hey guys, how are you doing? Fine. And what do you have here? They explained what they do, what Clusiv is about, what it stands for and everything. And that took my attention. They said, we give training. Do you give training? I usually like trainings. I always try my best to improve, particularly my computer skills. I have been using computer for more than 10 years, but I am always eager to improve my skills because that's very important in profession, in academic setting and whatever. So I was interested. What trainings do you give? They told me about the courses, the Gmail and whatever. So what are the courses for? They said they are mainly for professionals, musicians and whatever. Then I asked them for their cards. They gave me their contacts, and then I asked them to contact me as soon as possible because I was interested. And then they emailed me, and I was happy because I didn't expect them to contact me. I immediately responded to their email and started the training. I was excited to start the training, and I took some 14 courses. I had basic understanding of each course, but the training I received perfected my understanding. I had so much gap in each course. I had the basics, but lacked something in each course. And then this training filled that gap perfectly. So I really am very, very pleased to have been involved in this training. I now feel confident in any job environment. I completed my PhD very recently, a week ago. So this training came at the right time with the perfect content. So yeah, that's it.
I really do applaud like kind of your advocacy at the NFB convention. Really, who would have ever known that this would have really been a pathway for you to discover Clusiv in the first place, and then a first-hand opportunity to experience some of the curriculum. Awesome, thank you. So Luke, walk us through maybe set of curriculums that you guys offer through Clusiv programming, perhaps some avenues that blind students can access. Obviously, a very essential skill sets that they may need to succeed in their employment or even in education.
Definitely. And I think that the best way to look at Clusiv is if you have keyboard familiarity and a very basic understanding of JAWS. Like essentially, that's assuming you're using JAWS fully and not Zoom text. So Zoom text, or Fusion and different qualifiers, right? But if you have a very basic understanding of JAWS, where Clusiv comes in is getting you competent and confident, as Kassahun said, to enter any workplace with any set of skills or any set of technology that they use. So our biggest course that sells the most often is the professional skills for the modern workforce. And so we cover both Gmail and Outlook, all the digital meeting platforms from Zoom to Microsoft Teams to Google Meets. And that's not just how to get on them and operate them, but how to change your camera inputs, your audio inputs, left, right, up, down, essentially, right? Know all the things. File storage, operating system mechanics.
Really, you could argue that's like down to basics.
Yeah. I mean, it is basic training for entering the modern technology-driven workforce, right? You need to know all this stuff. And then we have, of course, a version of that for low vision as well, which is focused on Fusion usage. From there, we have Fundamentals of Computer Science, which is largely a career exploration course. If you think you want to be in tech, but you've never really had the opportunity to learn how to write code, we teach you how to use JAWS or Fusion to navigate Visual Studio Code on your machine, the code editor, and then teach you about HTML, JavaScript, and CSS, which are the three big languages used to really control everything that's visualized on the internet. And that also serves as a prerequisite course for one of our career tracks, which is an accessibility analyst role. We have a career track that will get you a certification, get you trained up, and we'll even help you find a job being an accessibility analyst. That's a prereq for that. We then have some ones that are really oriented at pre-ets and things that like public schooling just skips. So financial literacy, everything from opening your first bank account, different savings programs, different debt relief programs, how to manage your credit score, how to grow your credit score, all the things that are critical, but schools just in general don't teach. We then go into internet safety, which is for perhaps someone didn't grow up with computers or technology in their household for a numerous variety of reasons, right? How do I make sure that I'm safe on the internet? How do I make sure that I understand spam, phishing, and all the different threats that exist out there, and really have good internet hygiene both at home and in the workplace? We then have our micro learnings, which is where instead of taking one big course that covers all that stuff, if you really just zoom in on Gmail, right? You can do that as well in a smaller setting. Then we've got these career tracks, which are much bigger multi-step courses, one for customer service, one for accessibility analyst, like I mentioned, and then one for college readiness. And if anybody wants to read through our courses, they just go to clusiv.io/courses.
So it sounds like it's a very comprehensive track. Is it a pretty seamless handoff? You start from perhaps like a core computer skills and then you kind of get to build off your own branch, or are there some suggested track that you get to explore as you begin the journey?
So we have suggested tracks that are very career oriented. Our primary way to reach the blind community is through vocational rehab. And so everything we do has to be pretty career oriented. But with that, part of what you learn inclusive is how to be more of an autodidact or a self-teacher, right? Because as I'm sure most of you have gained, it's critical, right? Teaching yourself is the only way that you really get to grow in your career or as a human in general. We try to empower that and empower the learner with the skills to go find that information for themselves.
So say a student, obviously Kassahun can speak a little bit more on this, is interested in taking a course or a set of comprehensive lesson, because it also encompasses really financial capability and asset building and financial literacy. They would advocate to their vocational rehabilitation agency, and then they would secure perhaps like a funding or resources to be able to jump right into Clusiv.
Yeah, a couple mechanisms, right? If you're not in vocational rehab, we do have a self-pay option, and occasionally we have scholarship opportunities that pop up. Like in Texas right now, there's a scholarship opportunity that has 4 seats or 3 seats left in it.
That's incredible.
But in general, you have to be in vocational rehab to get access to these full courses or self-pay. But our mobile app, if you have an iPhone and you type in Clusiv, Clusiv, in the App Store, the iPhone App Store, our app is free, and there's a couple of free modules on there if someone wants to try it out before they dig in.
That's great. That's a good plug. So our listeners can give it a try for themselves.
Yeah, and you can also communicate directly with us through that app. So if you have questions or anything like that, it's a good way to keep up with all the ongoing events we have.
Absolutely. Kassahun, would you like to share a little bit about maybe some track that you've dove deeper into with Clusiv, and then what was that kind of end result for you upon the completion of the program?
The good thing about this program, as far as I was able to understand, is that there are 2 things. One, comprehensive in terms of the course substance. That's one thing. The courses are practical, and they cover all sorts of area that you need training in. For instance, if you are a professional or if you have a job at a particular company, these are normally the package, or this is the package of knowledge or skill you need. You are almost like everybody at the work environment. If you have good knowledge or skill about the Microsoft Office package, then you are good. If you are good at PowerPoint, then you are good at making presentations at Office or whatever. If you have been assigned to make a presentation representing your company, then you are good, because they provide you with PowerPoint skills. If you are assigned to organize a meeting, conference that concern your office, you are good, because you are provided with courses on how to prepare or organize video conferencing, because there's a course on Teams, there's a course on Zoom, or so you are independent in organizing a conference if there is a demand at your company. So program is great, both in terms of the course content, the practical part of it, and in the target group. It's not just for professionals. It's also good for academicians. And I noted this thing to the organization in my post-course survey. So I strongly, it was a great program, and I recommend that program for my blind fellows, even anywhere in the world.
I know you hinted a little bit at maybe some evolving pipelines, expanding curriculum. It sounds like most of this is done in a digital delivery. I know there are patches of blind population who may not have access to even internet or broadband. Is that something that Clusiv is really aware of, and are there kind of plans to potentially expand outreach around folks who may not have even the technology access?
Yeah, no, that's a really good question, a very interesting point, Seyoon. I think that you're honestly the first person to bring it up in a forum. So commend you for that. It's hard. The current chapter of Clusiv is really about creating training that is reachable from anywhere. So you don't have to worry about transportation concerns. If COVID or something else happens, you don't have to worry about not being able to progress towards your goal for a year or however many months. You can take this from the comfort of your home at your time. And if you need a break, you take a break. And if you want to go at it for 12 hours, you do that. As far as like getting to people that don't have access to technology, that is a part of the phase we're actively working on it. I don't get an opportunity to talk about it often, so it's kind of exciting. It's very exciting, really. As many people know, especially if they keep up with politics, the broadband bill and the broadband money that is coming out of the federal government is some of the biggest tranches of spending that has occurred outside of, well, really anything in the past 50 plus years. Outside of a war effort, it's the biggest tranches of money that are going to get spent. And with broadband expense, I've spoken to the National Governors Association. I've in front of all of the state's governors, which is a very cool opportunity.
That's really cool.
My big point to them was that we need to include access to this broadband, or else we're going to continue leaving blind individuals, low vision individuals in the back. And I think that that's something, while I'm one man and I lead a very strong company of great people, everybody needs to start using their voice. These broadband offices in the states, every state has a broadband director because they had to appoint one to help distribute this money. All NFB members, all blind and low vision individuals across the country need to be in contact with that office and make their voices heard. That is really the next step in us solving the problem you brought up, Seyoon, and it's a problem that doesn't get enough light shed on it. So applause and commendations for that.
Right. It's a continual evolution, especially someone who resides in the state of Missouri. There are oftentimes, when I take an Amtrak through the state, there are patches of population, young and old, who may not have access to broadband and network. And then it's a very transformative tool. Like, we treat internet and web these days, I mean, almost like an electricity and oxygen and water. It's a utility. It's not so much of you're privileged enough to have access to it. It became such a core part of our lives. So very important stuff. I just want to briefly touch a little bit on some potential changes. Obviously, technology is a constantly evolving thing. And really, Kassahun and Luke, you two could both speak on this. Upon the completion of the training, or as the curriculums continue to get pushed out, are there plans to explain to other platforms like a Mac, other screen readers like NVDA, just so it gives blind folks smart choices? Is that something that Clusiv has thought about?
Yeah. For people out there listening that are thinking about a career in product, these are some of the hard choices you'll be faced with. Right. Product design is a constant living beast that you got to battle with and wrestle with often. When it came to make this decision of where do we really focus all of our resources to start, right? Because I had to go raise venture capital, and to get our first venture capital check, I had to pitch over 185 investors to get our first.
Oh my gosh.
So 185 no's to get one yes. And then the other yeses started flowing. But with that, we had this limited bank account to kind of hire people, get the experts we need to create content. And content is inherently, especially when it's depthy, which Kassahun can attest to, right? It's very detailed. It can take time to create and make it personable and create it well, which we pride ourselves on. And so we had to pick one avenue, and that avenue was JAWS. And the reason was that it's the only thing I can guarantee you will be accepted by your employer. So NVDA, a great screen reader and a great tool, no shade thrown towards them whatsoever, they are an open source platform, and no employer with any sort of security protocol is going to let someone use open source software when accessing company data, company machines, company anything really. So we won't train to that. When it comes to Mac and VoiceOver, that's where it gets complicated, right? Because if you get a job in tech, it's 50-50 chance if you're going to be using a Mac or a Windows machine.
Especially these days.
Yeah, most of those companies will let you use a Windows machine as an accommodation, so JAWS is still the safe bet. Will we expand into VoiceOver? Most definitely. As far as pipeline goes, that might be a year or two from now. but that is definitely in the pathway. But just some explanation to like how the product mind had to really think about that and solve the problem for the first go around.
That's definitely important for sure. Thanks for sharing that. And I am a huge believer in, as a blind person, to have as many tools in your toolbox so you can be adaptable, handle ambiguity really well. But just as that is important for companies and enterprises, JAWS is still by far the universally accepted screen reader. They've established themselves really well with a lot of big corporations and companies in different capacities. So that's definitely important. This is for you, Kassahun. Since you've completed a curriculum, as JAWS receive updates, as Office products get updates, do you feel ready to adapt to those changes with the skill sets you've acquired?
Very much so. I mean, as I said, I had the basics in each course, but this time so much has changed. I mean, in terms of mastering each course, a lot has changed. So now I have even started to confidently apply for jobs at universities. I mean, I don't claim to lack any gap, at least in those courses. So what I'm doing now is I'm going back to the lecture notes I was taking while studying the courses, and then try to manage each course, each program, to see the difference before and after training. Mm-hmm. So I'm now ready to go to any company or university or college or whatever and say that, are you skilled or competent in this or that program? Definitely yes.
Wow, that's awesome to hear, especially for our listeners.
That is one of the most meaningful compliments and really just a sentiment of mission achieved, Kassahun. So thank you for sharing that. That hits heavily. So I'm glad we could help with that.
Your work, Luke, is making a difference to so many population. Hopefully this podcast could be a great source of avenue for more folks to learn a little bit more about Clusiv, no matter where they're in their life. So I think we're at a great stopping point. Thank you both for being on here. And then, Luke, thank you for all the work that you're doing towards the blindness community and raising expectations of what blind people can do and can achieve to really bridge the gap in employment and education and so many things that blind people can do. So thanks.
Thank you, Seyoon. And
Thank you.
I want to briefly add the most important thing to me is that for all of these listeners, please follow us, email us, connect with us through the app, the website. There's a million different ways. If you find my phone number, feel free to text it. It's hidden in there somewhere. Genuinely, when people engage with Clusiv, they help us create solutions, not just for now. Because right now, maybe we don't have a solution that fits for your particular case if you're listening. Maybe we do. But by helping us grow, by telling someone else about us, by forwarding this on, you're helping one of the most innovative companies continue to build solutions, remove those barriers, and make the American dream more accessible. And thank you for having me on this podcast, Seyoon. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you to your special guests, Luke Simianer and Kassahun Yibeltal. This podcast was created and produced by Seyoon, Choi, and Kinshuk Tella, and hosted by me, Seyoon Choi, out of the National Association of Blind Students Content Creation Committee. For all things blind students resources such as this and more, visit our website at www.nabslink.org or join us on Facebook at facebook.com/NABS page. Are you interested in assisting with the production of the NABS Now podcast? Email Seyoon at schoi@nfbmo.org. Thank you for listening.